Welcome into 12 News at 9. I'm Rachel Hackbarth. The family of 22-year-old Paoly Bedeski responding tonight as a third-party review of the apartment fire that killed their daughter moves slowly. Bedeski was the first of several 911 callers to report the fire. We've been covering the story extensively after questions surfaced about how dispatchers handled that call. Fact Finder 12 investigator Brandon Stick joining us now with the vendor selected for that review and what comes next.
That's right, Rachel. Jensen Hughes might have a familiar ring. It's a public safety consulting firm that reviewed the Wichita Police Department in the aftermath of the 2021 text message scandal. The county will now pay that firm $190,000 to review all aspects of the Brookhollow apartment fire. Paoly Bedeski's call to 911 on October 13th last year
Okay, 911.
left many questions.
She would be here today had we had that information.
The information about Ms. Bedeski calling from apartment number 306 was not intelligibly heard or understood on the phone from the dispatcher.
What I heard and what other people didn't hear is just, I was in shock.
Like why firefighters were never told about Bedeski's frantic call and why it took them 20 minutes to find her. 5 months after a promise by Sedgwick County commissioners to review the Brookhollow fire response, Sedgwick County's Board of Bids and Contracts voted to recommend a third party.
Recommendation is to accept the proposal from Jensen Hughes Incorporated.
Commissioners approved the contract with Jensen Hughes at a cost of $190,000. Half of that will be paid by the city of Wichita. The contract was finalized May 31st, with a report expected to be issued in about 90 days. That report will include a full analysis of the fire response, from the first 911 call from Bedeski to when the last Wichita fire investigator left the scene. And just this afternoon, I've talked to an attorney for the Bedeski family about this review. He tells me in a statement the Bedeski family is relying on the county to conduct a thorough and timely investigation while the family undertakes their own independent review. This dual effort aims to provide justice for Paoly and to protect the community from future errors so no family experiences what the Bedeski family had to endure.
Brandon, thank you.